Hi, it's Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of Contrarian. And if it's Monday, it must be Pablo Torre. Pablo, welcome back.
Hello, Jen. A lot, as always. Needless to say, almost too much
Yes.
going on for us, but happy to do it.
And I love doing it on Monday because the sports events are just fresh in our mind. In fact, as we were talking about what we wanted to talk about, I left one out, and that is the phenomenal finish in the Travelers Golf Tournament. On the last hole, the last shot, the local homeboy makes good, sinks a putt. I did feel for Tommy Fleetwood, who just like choked. There's no other way to
Yeah,
say it.
that's how you say it, actually. Golf is
Yeah.
a crucible. It's a psychological humiliation ritual for some. Tommy
Yeah.
Fleetwood, this is your life. That was your life, and it happens to the best of them, literally.
One of the announcers was saying, because at least for 3 rounds, Scotty Scheffler had a really not good tournament. She said, you know, people wonder, how do you play this badly? And she said, it's golf. And that like says it all. So
Yep.
why people would play that infuriating sport and think it's fun, I'm not sure.
That is beyond me. That part is absolutely beyond me as well.
So let's talk basketball. What a, in one way, thrilling and in one way, kind of gut wrenching. And everyone thought it was going to be over in six. It went seven, tons of excitement. What did you think of game seven? What did you think of the series?
Yeah, look, the two best words in sports, as many often say, are game seven. The worst two words in sports that I often think about these days is Achilles tear. And so when you see Tyrese Halliburton, who had made his legend as like almost this gunslinger, the most clutch
Yeah.
player in the sport, the guy who now when he walks into a room, even the all-stars got to sit up straight and like sweat a little bit. Um, when that guy goes down because he had a calf strain, which is really, that's the prelude to the Achilles tear, which is what happened. When that guy goes down, just slumps to the court, everybody sort of knew
Yeah.
that, and what they knew was twofold. One, it is going to be so bleeping hard for the Pacers to win this game in Oklahoma City without their best player. That was the most obvious one. But the second one was this might well be one of those game sevens where an image of that kind of just suffering, of just like bad, the basketball gods are often invoked, Jen,
Yes.
and sometimes they feel Old Testament, like
Yes.
biblical, this is miserable. And that
Yes.
sticks with me the next day, obviously, even as I remark upon how incredibly impressive it is for the Oklahoma City Thunder, the smallest market team, to have gone from, by the way, they had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Sam Presti, their GM, drafted those three guys with his first three drafts. They're all MVPs at one point in their career. And then they lost all three and you had to reset. And they reset with this the deepest, best young collection of talent that really was the story of the season is the Thunder
Absolutely.
ascending.
It's so thrilling. We have a few examples recently that a team had all these stars and they were fine. They were going along, get rid of everybody, put in a bunch of young kids, and then boom. That was the story of PSG in soccer. That's the story of OKC. It really does give you kind of like that spark of sports, which is sort of about potential. You really don't know who's got it and who's going to come together until they start playing.
Yeah, the math of the NBA has changed a bit, in part because of this wave that the Thunder has been leading. So the
Yeah.
old wave used to be you need a big three. You need Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kevin Durant. You need LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade. You go down the line. This season has been about really depth and youth and team construction, which is to say the
Exactly.
financial regulations in terms of like salary cap stuff have made a difference, but there's also something else just about like the way the game is played now. And I
Yeah.
think there is a beauty to this style. There's a beauty to
Exactly.
just so many talented young guys outrunning each other, hustling. Look, the Pacers, credit to them. This
Yeah.
was a 7 game series. No one expected the Indiana Pacers to be in
No,
the finals. Um,
no.
the Thunder, I mean, look, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was the MVP of the regular season, averaged 30 a game in the playoffs. But even still, he's not the conventional best player on a championship team, even still. And so it's just there's been a bit of a sea change in terms of what the modern and maybe the postmodern NBA now actually looks like.
I feel like this is the sort of the antidote to the, Moneyball, the analytics, that there's something still that they can't capture. It's not all numbers. And that's kind of the part I love about sports. Like you just don't know. You don't know
Yeah. Oh,
everything.
oh, but there's also something else. Like so data as a concept, right? The nerds won. The nerds
Yeah,
won.
yeah. All
So
right.
so they have the money, they have the power, all of that is happening on one track. But the other track to me is still like, hey, do you recognize talent? Can you
Yeah,
scout? Can you identify like it's still in the NFL, in baseball, in basketball, it's still such a crapshoot. And
it
so
really is.
if you have a general manager, Jen, who can combine both, who can speak the math fluently, but also really be good at personnel and like reading people and selecting again on the roulette wheel of talent. Is this guy going to be the guy? They've just hit on a remarkable number of those lottery tickets, and
Right,
it's just and they by the way they still have like 13 more first rounders. So the other part of it about the Thunder is just that they're planning for the present. They've won in the present, but they're ahead of schedule because the
right.
future is really where this was supposed to pay off. They just did it a lot quicker than people realized.
There's a politics analogy, which there is in most sports, that I like to think about, which is, everyone is always looking for the man or the woman on the white horse. Who's the next Obama? Will, Kamala come back to, really take it to Trump? And you look around and suddenly there's Brian Schatz. Suddenly there's Chris Murphy. Like people do emerge. It's not always the big names who are the big results. It teaches you like take a chance, take an opportunity. You can be somebody too.
Yeah, I call it sometimes the great man theory of
Yeah.
sports, where
And
it's just like, oh wait, but that's the guy. It can only be him. And when he is in charge, everything follows. And I'm like, well, it's just not that way. Again, the math in politics, the math in sports, hopefully the math in culture is changing, where there is
yeah,
now a level of there's a level of surprise that I think people are
yeah.
reckoning with as it solidifies into the next conventional wisdom, of course. But for now, it feels like we're in an era of disruption too.
Absolutely. So there is someone who is the big person in sports, and it's a her, which is Kaitlin Clark. The debate rages on. There's a big spread in New Yorker. Is she an unfair target? Do you get targeted because you're just the best? Like, Michael Jordan? Is this a race thing? Is this a problem with our officiating that these people don't get, like, what the line should be? What's your take on this whole Caitlin Clark fouls, not fouls, kind of thing?
Yeah, my take is yes. Yes to all of it, I think. Yeah,
Right.
look, this is a yes and story, as I'm fond of saying these days.
Yeah.
Is it true that Caitlin Clark is the best box office draw, maybe in all of basketball? And I include the men in that
Yeah.
too, by the way. I think the answer might be yes at this point. No one draws eyeballs when you compare it, especially to where the league was before Caitlin Clark, like
Right.
Caitlin Clark. She's also to me, indisputed. Like she is the closest thing to Steph Curry, certainly the women's game has ever had. But it's also
Yeah.
something bigger than that because she's also kind of budding Michael Jordan. And I say
Yeah.
that because she also has this edge. She's kind of like a bit sociopathic, and I mean that as a
Yeah.
compliment, where she's like
Yeah.
a competitive,
Exactly.
and she's like, she is calling her own number. She's taken 49-foot threes. She is very visibly agitated, sometimes at her own teammates, but largely at her
Yeah.
opponents. So in terms of her being likable or not, this is kind of what attends anybody who does resemble the greatest in their sport. And I say that, by the way, with all due apology, of course, to Asia Wilson and the actual incumbents here who have been far more decorated and you could argue better still as all around players. But Caitlin Clark, if the question is, you're starting a team right now, who do you pick? Caitlin is obviously the answer, obviously. And so
Absolutely.
beyond that, the question of the fouls, right? Like, what do you do with it? it is interesting, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, it does that description, everything I just said breeds a certain understandable resentment because sports are they're a zero-sum game. They are an
Yes.
ego contest, and you layer into that in the WNBA as well, the idea that this is a sport that was really quietly toiling without this attention. And it's I believe statistically it is a largely
Yeah.
black female league. And so this is where it's also a little bit Jeremy Lin to me. And this is
Yeah.
a longer sort of like thesis here. But the question is, when you have somebody who is a minority within the sport that they are playing and came seemingly from nowhere and immediately got marketing value and attention and adoration and jersey sales and television love and all that
Right.
stuff, it is natural for that to not merely be the story of popularity, but also every other demographic factor that helps inform the people who were there before. Wait a minute, why am I not getting that? And so it's the
Yeah.
zero sum game stuff. It's a sociology experiment, but also more than anything else to me, it's just the greatest show in basketball. And that's what
It
happens.
really is. On the fouling, I kind of think, we shouldn't think of this in the abstract. What's a foul? What's not a foul? It's kind of what kind of game does the league want to have? Do they want a more physical game? If they do, these refs should be holding back. Um, isn't there something organic about, how you draw the line? Is this something the league comes into? Is this something the refs decide? How do you sort that out?
Refereeing in basketball is always more art than science, right? So
Yeah,
one key thing is they are told to officiate the same play differently at the end and at the beginning. Already you're in the realm of I know it when I see it, right? To quote a
yeah,
Supreme Court case. You're already in that realm of like, ooh, this is beyond the line. But what time of game is it? Who's committing it? Are they bigger? Are they smaller? Or whatever. All that stuff factors in. In terms of this, what kind of game do you want? I mean, my standard's pretty simple. I want the game to be the star. So
yeah,
if there are these skirmishes that are stopping gameplay, if there are
yeah,
plays that threaten the safety of the players, I mean, all players, but certainly the players that I want to watch, I am a
yeah.
selfish consumer.
Fan, yes,
I want exactly as a fan, I want the best players playing, and I want the game to be, I want the game to be free flowing. So as long as those can be provided for, then you, Supreme Court Justice, can rule however you'd like. Um, I think what everybody's pointing to with the Kaitlin Clark stuff is this problem of they didn't intervene enough
yeah,
because all of these fights broke out and it just slowed everything down. And it felt like, look, sometimes you need to be preemptive when it comes to how to call a game with the
yeah,
physicality. Um, I just think that they lost control and it was too late,
yeah,
and that's what we saw
yeah.
a bunch of.
Well, it's never too late to reset the bar and, set the standard. So I've saved it until last because it is my favorite story because, of course, I am a dyed in the wool Dodger fan, as is my partner Norm. We lead Dodger Blue. They did something that I was frankly a little surprised they hadn't done earlier. Um, Talk to us not only about the incident with ICE, but also this commitment they've made to the Hispanic community in Los Angeles.
I would say there's no baseball team that is more closely associated with the Latino Hispanic community than the Dodgers. I think that's true of probably any major American sports team. Maybe the San Antonio Spurs are there because of the Mexican tie. But anyway, it's a short list. The Dodgers are
Oh,
atop it. And so what we saw, by the way, with the disputed reports of ICE showing up at the gates of Dodger Stadium, which were, I think, disproven by various videos, statements, interviews, right? The
right.
question there, not to relitigate the whole thing, but the bottom line view I have is when you are driving around in unmarked vans, wearing masks, not announcing who you even are, and this is kind of the whole thing you want to brand yourself as, then it's really hard to convince people that, oh, we were nice, we were Homeland Security, oh, we were Border Patrol, it's all the same Gestapo, is how it feels.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so when you show up at that stadium, which is this again, this shrine to, as I call it
Yes.
often, a multicultural America, right? Like actual
Yes.
actual multiculturalism in practice, is what Dodger
Absolutely.
Stadium feels like. When you show up there, you don't need to be a political scientist to realize why it's a useful target. Um,
Yeah.
so what do you do in response, right? And I think there has been a hesitancy that we've noticed in our conversations
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
to really wade into it with both feet, because the whole thing has been, if you're a sports team, do I really want to pick a fight with a guy who loves to be fighting? Um,
Yeah.
and in this case, I think they finally declared enough is enough. Like, no, this is our community. This is our people. We live here. We're doing this every day, 81 games a year at Dodger Stadium. Um,
Right.
the right side of history is clear in the present. And so the idea that, oh no, we gotta cater to the people who disappear, innocent civilians. Like, not a hard call, but I'm glad the call was finally made as to which side they're on.
Exactly. Now, frankly, the financial commitment is nice. It could have been a little bit bigger. It seems cheap. You know, they
A
could spend
low
a few
bar,
million.
a low
Yeah.
bar. I mean, to be clear,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
I'm with you on that too. I am with you
Right.
on
It's
that.
not, $1 million doesn't do what it used to be. $1 million isn't $1 million anymore. But be that as it may, they do get credit. And I gotta think that at some point, whether it's this incident or other incidents, this whole new thing, we never used to have this of unmarked people with the masks, with the big guns. This is an effort to intimidate, to scare, to bully Americans. And we just saw that horrendous film of the father of several Marines being pummeled. What are we doing here? Are these people just unleashed on our streets? Are we supposed to accept this as business as usual?
It's also theater, clearly. So like
Yeah.
two things are happening, right? So they're actively terrorizing
Yes.
innocent people, and they're also doing it to theatrically make themselves seem, this is now the Trump administration, like
Yeah.
they're actually doing more than they are.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
that's like it's the perfect Trumpian combination of like
Yes. Yes.
cruelty that is masking actual lack of getting stuff done, even in the realm of cruelty. It's sort of like,
Yes.
look, their answer to all of this is always branding. And so to them, they feel like the branding is clear, right? This is happening to them, to the other, not to you, right?
Exactly.
And what I ask any feeling, thinking human is how it would feel if, in fact, you were the person in the video. Like, how would you deal
Yes.
with it? How would you deal with, I mean, it's also just tempting fate. Like, it's now, I think, an obvious inevitability, but like, there is going to be a point at which they are not welcomed but fought back against because it's
Absolutely.
unclear. Because it's unclear what's happening, right? Am I being robbed? Am I being arrested? Am I being deported? Am I being
Absolutely.
assassinated? Like, it's a recipe for, frankly,
Absolutely.
for rioting. And
Absolutely.
I think they welcome that, is the sick part, right?
They
They
do.
are courting it, is the sick
They
part.
do. And that's what happened in LA, but it's also a recipe for gunfight at the OK Corral and the
Actual
Homeland Security
gunfighting.
people or the ICE people getting taken down, since apparently it's a good thing for everyone in America to have a gun. So everyone in America has a gun. And as you said, it's so unlike what we've come to think of appropriate law enforcement, which, first of all, is supposed to be serving the community. These people have no interest in doing that, but also a level of respect, a level of restraint, a level of transparency. So you know who you're dealing with. We're not supposed to be the country with, the armed, guys in black. That's in Russia. That's what their
Well,
guys look like. And now we're imitating that?
and now we're seeing sitting politicians being literally assassinated by people impersonating
Yes,
those unmarked, unidentified officers, right? So all of this is
absolutely.
happening as obviously as anyone could imagine. The problem in terms of like what happens next year is that what there, I grew up in a country, America, where I just was familiar with the idea that a police officer wears a uniform. So you know to respect him. right? That's kind of what you're taught. They have sirens, they have uniforms, and yes, they're undercover cops and all that, but by and large,
Right.
they are there to protect your community, so respect them in turn. What this administration is courting here is a very ancient distrust of the police broadly, and
Yes.
it's poisoning a well that years since 2020, years
Yeah.
have been spent trying to clean it, to clean up that relationship,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
just setting us backwards in ways that again feel deeply intentional. Like we're
Absolutely.
trying to solve some of this, but they are actively destroying the few bonds that remain in America, and it's sick.
Absolutely. And I think what you said is so important. They're not actually deporting very many people. So they have to make this show of it, this brutal show. It's like these gladiator shows they put on TV, but this is real. I also think that's like the metaphor and the difference between sports and our current politics. Sports, you don't destroy the other side. You beat the other side within the rules of the game. And you do it in a way that leaves everybody to fight another day and maintains the game. In politics, we're now about this administration destroying its enemies politically, legally, physically. And as you said, their goal is level the place because they have some other vision of what they're going to put in. So it's really like, are you going to build the stadium or are you just going to blow it up? And right now we're getting a lot of blowing up.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want look, the whole metaphor of sports is also perpetual to me because it's the one place seemingly where people who disagree gather under the same roof and like root for the same things. They are we are as fans constantly feeling brotherhood with people who disagree with us politically.
Yeah,
Um, to me, politics in that way, as well as the ways you have astutely described, feels so foreign.
I
Um,
know.
it
I
feels
know.
like a
I still just,
repudiation of meritocracy, of honor, of humanity, of multiculturalism, of a future in which you can actively yell at each other, but then go home and, return to what feels like a civil society. Like sports is where we can be psychopathic. What's the problem now is that everything else feels like,
psychopathic.
yeah,
Yes.
you're yelling at a ref, except now it's an unmarked van. It's like this is a
Yeah.
bit much.
Exactly. Well, thank you as always, Pablo. We talk sports, but we talk so much more than sports. And next week, when we come back, I'm going to be on a high because Wimbledon is going to be
Oh
underway.
man.
And that is talk about the citadel of a sport, the shrine of the sport. Um, I actually, you can't afford to go to Wimbledon because it's thousands of dollars. But we actually took a tour. They have tours, and we took it. And they, of course, tell you now, don't pluck the grass.
Oh, the
It takes
grass.
years to grow this. And it's like, okay, I'm plucking the grass. This is friggin' and I'm taking the grass with me. And it's gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Everything. I've never been to the All England Club,
oh
which
my
is what it's
God, it's
called.
spectacular.
But the
It is a worthwhile.
strawberries, the cream, the grass, the legend
Grass.
precedes it. I
Yep.
am excited to talk about it next week.
All right, great. Well, have a great week, Pablo. As always, thank you. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Thanks, Jen. Bye.